could talk about it forever. But I think it's a great question, because what's the difference between a great teacher, a great mentor, and a leader?
This prophecy is how they enslave us!
First of all, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for this movie. I think it's epic, it's amazing, so thank you. And Timothy, in Arrival, the characters talk about a theory that says that the language you speak determines how you think and how you see everything. And that's interesting, because I think that happens with Paul, and the language of the Fremen. He learns it, and he starts to understand the desert power and the rituals and the importance of the community and the story, and etc., etc. So how would you describe the importance of language for your character, especially in this movie?
Oh man, I love that question. I love how you said it. I think, how did I put it? The quality of Chekhov's in this film, I would also say in the book, it's like we have, with languages here, and God, I'm gonna sound like a fucking college major, but a lot of languages don't have words that other languages have. In French, and people say awkward in French now, but there's no real word for awkward. Which key representative of, like, oh God, I just sound like I'm out of my mind. That's not so much an expression of the culture out there. So similarly, Chekhov's is a highly communicative language. That for Paul is, as you said, a representation of him being accepted amongst these people. And in the context of the movie, really is the way he communicates his status, his leadership, his authority. So it's all those things. But I don't know if I did your question justice, but it's his way in. It's also a sign of his Messiah status.
Well, I'd very much like to be equal to you.
Maybe I'll show you the way.
Zendaya, Chani is like a daughter of war, she's a warrior. She says in the first film, since she was born, there were violence and her people was suffering, But what I love about her is that she only knows violence as a way of freedom, but if she had the chance to take a way out without violence, she will take it, because she's a person who loves and who cares and who empathizes with the context.
Absolutely. I think if anything, the most difficult part about the love story is that I think this type of love or this type of tenderness, I think, is a new feeling for her. And I think she has a lot of guards built up because of what Paul represents to her. And if anything, she despises the entire Bene Gesserit system that made him exist in her world. So just the sheer idea that there would be love there for him is difficult enough. And I think that, she doesn't really get to experience as much tenderness, I think, as other people get to experience. So I think that this is all very new to her and scary, rightfully so. And so for me, I was like, how do we build a love story when someone is so afraid to allow this type of love to exist for her and allow this person in, especially when there's a battle between what she thinks is right and what she feels is right in her head, and then what her heart might be yearning or wanting and wishing that he was someone else. And I think it only makes for, I think, a more devastating end, which I can't, give away. But yeah, absolutely. I think she is, while extremely powerful and strong physically, and fierce, I think she also is very strong and fierce in her vulnerability too.
Because all my visions lead to horror.
Because you lose control.
Because I gain it.
I love really how it's one of my favorite characters in this universe because yes, he's in service of the Atreides, but he's more than that because he's a teacher for Paul, you know? And I was thinking about how teachers are leaders in a certain way. So I was thinking like the possibility of Bernie Halleck being a leader in a certain point, and I would like to know what do you think about that, and if that is a possibility, considering that you know the character.
No, it's a great question, and I think probably, at least in my life, when I think about it, the great teachers don't imagine themselves the great leaders. I think, you know, what I've always appreciated about working with people like Denis or the Coens or some of the really kind of wonderful directors that I've worked with is there's less ego as opposed to people who are the lesser filmmakers and screaming and yelling and this and that and demanding and they want everybody to see their power. And I think that there's a lot less power in that. So I think I think it's up to other characters or other people to determine whether he's a leader or not. You know, I think the great thing about Gurney in part 2 is the fact that he's willing to follow Paul in his search and his confrontation with himself and coming to terms with himself. It's a very different Gurney than you see in the beginning, where he's comfortable, he's got the Atreides around him, he's servicing the Atreides, and it's a different mentality. You can almost see a little ego and a little arrogance in there, where you see something that's been beaten down because he thought he lost his whole. Anyway, we could talk about it forever. But I think it's a great question, because what's the difference between a great teacher, a great mentor, and a leader yourself, you know?
Show me who you are.
Austin, Dune talks about loyalty and family and the importance of belonging and protecting your people. But I think that your character is the opposite, and that's because he was born and raised in a violent context, you know? His family is awful. You know, so I don't know if this is right for me to say it, but I kind of understand your character because he's loyal to himself because he grew up alone.
Yeah, I think you're very accurate with that. You know, Paul and Feyd are often talked about as two flip sides of the same coin, and there's inherently deeply selfless things that Paul is doing, you know, in going on this path of doing what he believes is right for others, whereas Feyd is very, he was raised in this brutality and this violent nature where in order to survive you have to be bloodthirsty with your power. So he's very selfish in that way. So I think you're accurate for sure.
Paul Atreides is still alive.
I love how Denis writes his characters, the male characters, but most of all the women characters, because they can be warriors like Chani, but at the, you know, on the other side there are this group of women that are controlling the historical narrative through written and spoken words, and that's impressive. And what I love the most about that is how they are not necessarily correct, you know? There are no women that behave just because someone told them to behave in a good way. So I would like to know, what do you think about that, considering your character?
Yeah, we've actually been discussing that quite a bit recently, of just how so many of these women are in the very same situation that the men are in. However, they are dealing with it in a completely different way, and they are also trying to either obtain control, keep control, control. Like, these women are incredibly powerful in their own rights, and completely different. Like, Chani and Irulan couldn't have. I mean, they're so far from each other. They've had different upbringings, different cultures, different people. They are made of different things, and yet they are both kind of trying to do very similar things. And it doesn't mean that one is more strong than the other or one is more powerful than the other. They are both just trying to, I suppose, navigate this way through the scenario that's happening in this world. It also just makes for a very exciting set of female characters to play and to watch and to be in this world with. I don't think I've been in a movie quite this male character heavy, but also the women are completely dominating the storyline. It's very, very exciting, and the respect and the weight goes into both sexes equally. And I think that's what you find so menacing about the Bene Gesserits, because they might not be like the Harkonnen, they might not be physically able to win a fight against all these other men. However, their brains are terrifying.
They can literally make them do
yes,
whatever they
exactly.
want.
They are terrifying. And there is something so respectful that Denis has done with just allowing these women in the frames that they have to, I suppose, carry their own importance.
Yeah, it's great. So thank you very
Thank
much
you
for
so
your
much.
time, and thank you very much for this movie again.
Thank you.
It's only fragments. Nothing's clear.